Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers with me, Murray, your 10-minute weekly fix of ancient warfare related stuff, where I rant at you about ancient warfare, which is endlessly fascinating. And you can just forget about the world and think about ancient warfare. How many times a day do you think about ancient warfare? Basically, it's constant for me. So, it's not even worth answering. Anyway, you can, of course, ask us a question. You can send us a postcard, an email, comment on a previous video. You can become a backer on Patreon, one of three different levels: Legionary, Optio, and Centurion, $1, $5, and $10. You can listen to the other podcasts to get ideas about questions that you might want to ask. There's the big podcast once a month, generally about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour long. There's now an ancient history podcast. You can even, if you like, listen to other podcasts by other people and then ask me a question that's arisen out of listening to that. I'm happy to try and do that. I might not be able to answer it. Anyway, this question is from Carlos. Thank you, Carlos. Besides elephants, what other units or ideas did the Hellenistic kingdoms adopt from the peoples of the lands they ruled? Like, did they have horse archer units, etc.? Wow. Yes, indeed. And it's an interesting one. So keeping it to Hellenistic rather than getting too wide and varied. Yes, they did. They used the native units, for lack of a better term, to fight the way they fought. So horse archers and things like that. But obviously for the Hellenistic period, the dominance of Macedonian style heavy cavalry and Macedonian phalanx is the core. Cretan archers stick around as a guard to the phalanx. Hypaspists, whatever they are, see previous podcast, guarding the other flank of the phalanx. Those are core things. And so in a sense, when you look at the later battles, whether it be against other successor states, so Hellenistic king versus Hellenistic king, the Diadochoi wars, or against the Romans, or against the Gauls in the early 3rd century, you're generally dealing with those sorts of units. So the core, the elite, for lack of a better term, is still Macedonian style, even though mostly by very not long after, they're not Macedonian. They're the offspring of the Macedonians who were with the Seleucids or the Ptolemies. But so they would claim Macedonian heritage, but not be from Macedon, because Macedon's its own empire under the Antigonids. Yes, no, not the Antigonids. Is it the Antigonids? Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, and so what you then get is other units coming in. Now, in some senses, those units are less effective and less important, but in many ways more long-standing, especially Cataphract and Clibinarius cavalry, which we'll get to. Others are adopted for show. The poor old history of the military elephant is a tricky one, because more often than not, the elephant is ineffective and as dangerous to your own troops as to the enemy in the history of ancient battles. And I'm talking here about Greek and Roman battles. They seem to be far more effective in ancient Indian warfare. And probably ancient African warfare too. In that sense, you do get the Seleucids adopting the head-to-toe armored cavalry that they have encountered, and that then is adopted and adapted by various cultures thereafter. Sarmatian probably has its own tradition, but you then get, the Parthian cataphracts, the Sasanian cataphracts, and then by the late Roman Empire, probably under Constantius II in the 350s, Roman cataphracts and Clibinarius. I think that there's a differentiation between a cataphract, which is a heavily armored cavalry man on a non-armored horse or a partially armored horse, and a Clibinarius, the baking tin men, which is the etymology of the word kliban, which is an oven, which I think is the heavily armored or fully armored cavalry man and an armored cavalry horse, which of course leads to the knights and things like that, shining knights in medieval and Arthurian myth, because there are units of Clibinari, which might be associated with the Arthurian myth. See my book, Finis Britannia. So anyway, I get distracted. Now, so there is that. That's probably the one that has the longest lasting effect. There's the adoption by the Seleucids of the heavily armored cavalrymen, the cataphract and the clibonari. Now, you do also get the adoption of scythed chariots. Now, like the elephant, and unlike we get to be shown in film, scythed chariots seem to be a relatively ineffective weapon on the battlefield. We hear about them at Gaugamela, for instance, and then they disappear. They don't actually appear in the actual combat. We hear about them at the Battle of Cunaxa, and except for one anecdote, they disappear from that battle account as well. So the scythe chariot, despite popular imagination, seems to never actually do anything, and it's a terror weapon that terrorizes in idea only. In practice, a bit useless. In the account of the Battle of Cunaxa, where the Greek mercenaries suffer not a single casualty, there's a story of a guy getting run over by a chariot, but emerging uninjured. And you're like, these are the fearful scythe chariots that don't kill a single member of the mercenary force. Not particularly effective. But you do get the adoption, again by Seleucid and others, of scythe chariots to look intimidating and to create fear. But I don't think they're ever a practical weapon. And, later in the Anonymous De Rebus Bellicus, you should have scythe chariots. So they come back as, aren't these scary? But again, they never seem to be as effective in practice as they are in the imagination. And we've seen scythe chariots come back in various art forms and in cinema. And again, thinking about them is very scary, but in the practicalities of ancient warfare, they don't seem to be that effective. Perhaps, again, this one vies with the heavy cavalry argument I just made. And in fact, I'm going to contradict myself and say that this is the longest lasting one, and that is the oval shield. Now, interestingly, the oval shield, archaeologically speaking, is found first in Celtic and Gallic contexts, and later famously adopted by the Romans under the Roman Republic, and of course by Hellenistic kingdoms under in the second and first centuries BC as the thureophoroi, based on the Greek term for the oval shield, which was the thureos. Now, there's a couple of arguments about that. One is that when the Gauls, the Senones, invade and fight the Battle of Allia in 390 BC, the Romans then go, that's a good idea. Let's steal chainmail armor from the Celts, Gauls, and the oval shield. That then becomes their main shield shape. And then when Pyrrhus of Epirus invades southern Italy in the early 3rd century BC, comes across those oval shields and goes, those are a good idea. They're much more practical than our round ones, and adopts them, and then they spread from there. The other argument, which is the one I favor, is, of course, the Gauls themselves are on the rampage, and they attack and sack Delphi, or attempt to sack Delphi and invade Greece in the early 3rd century BC. And I think it's there where its direct experience of the Gallic shield shape that leads to the Hellenistic adoption of the oval shield themselves for later lighter armed troops. They keep the round shields and the peltae for their phalanxes, and it's only lighter armed troops who are guarding the flanks of the phalanx that they adopt these for. And essentially, the thureophoroi replace the peltast as a lighter armed soldier. Now, that's getting distracted, but I think that those are probably the instances I can think of where the Hellenistic kings especially adopt the practices of the people that they've conquered. And I think in those terms, obviously the scythe chariot is a non-starter, but it's there, and it doesn't actually have any practical effect, but it has a theoretical effect. But I think heavy cavalry and obviously elephants and horse archers, but I think heavy cavalry and the oval shield are probably the two we can argue are the most in evidence of practices by conquered peoples that are adopted by Hellenistic kings. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for your question, Carlos. And I look forward to answering another question on Ancient Warfare Answers next time. Thanks. Bye.